AITA for dating my ex-wife's cousin even though her family hates it. My name is Justin, and I'm 36. 4 years ago, I went through a painful separation from my ex-wife, Dakota. We had been together almost a decade, and though we didn't have children, the split felt like losing a piece of myself. The silence in the house afterward felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. For months, I'd come home and expect to hear her voice, but there was nothing, just an emptiness that didn't let go. For a long time, I avoided anything to do with her side of the family. Even seeing her parents in town felt like reopening an old wound. It was too raw, too heavy. The one person I always had a soft spot for, though, was her cousin, Lyra. Back when I was married to Dakota, family gatherings were never easy, but Lyra had this calm energy about her. She never pushed, never judged. We weren't especially close, but there was an ease to our conversations that made the long dinners feel a little less suffocating. She would ask me about my work, share small things about her own life, and somehow, without meaning to, she made those evenings bearable. After the divorce, I never expected to see her again. I thought all of them, including her, would see me as an outsider who didn't belong in their lives anymore. Fast forward to last year. I was at a local book fair, flipping through worn-out pages of old novels when I saw her. At first, I almost pretended not to. I thought it would be awkward, but Lyra noticed me before I could turn away. She smiled, and it was the same warm smile I remembered from years before. She asked how I'd been, and instead of the polite small talk I expected, she really wanted to know. One coffee that afternoon turned into a few lunches, and before long, we were talking almost every day. I hadn't planned it, and I don't think she had either. It just happened. 6 months ago, we decided to start dating. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't reckless. It just felt right. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. There was no bitterness hanging over my head, no old wounds pulling me back. Being with her reminded me that life could move forward, even when it had felt stuck for so long. But the peace didn't last. A few weeks back, Lyra posted a picture of us at the beach on her Facebook. Nothing dramatic, just the two of us smiling, sunlight on our faces. Within hours, Dakota messaged me. Her words weren't casual. They weren't curious. They were sharp, cutting straight to the bone. "You couldn't find anyone else but her? You're shameless. Justin, you're humiliating me." Reading it made my stomach twist. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure what to say, but Lyra did. She told Dakota plainly that she didn't owe her an explanation, that we were adults, free to make our own choices. She said it with a steady calmness, but I could see her hands shaking as she typed. Dakota didn't take it well. She called Lyra selfish. She accused her of destroying family trust and said she had betrayed blood. Those words stuck in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. It didn't stop there. Dakota's parents reached out too. They called Lyra late at night, leaving long voicemails about respect, family duty, and shame. They messaged me as well, saying I had no right to stay connected to them through Lyra, that I was clinging to a family I didn't belong to anymore. When we didn't back down, they shifted tactics. They began commenting under Lyra's posts with subtle digs. Phrases like, "Some people have no shame," or "Not everyone can honor the past." The kind of words that weren't direct enough to be deleted, but heavy enough to make her pause every time she opened her phone. The tension only grew. One night, Lyra's phone buzzed constantly. First her aunt, then her uncle, then cousins she hadn't heard from in years. Each message carried the same undertone. "Think about what you're doing. Think about who you're hurting." It wasn't advice. It was pressure. It got heavier last week when Dakota showed up at Lyra's apartment. No warning, no invitation. She rang the buzzer again and again until Lyra gave in and let her up. I wasn't there, but Lyra told me what happened. Dakota paced the living room, her voice rising and falling in sharp bursts. She said she would never forgive Lyra for choosing me. She accused her of breaking every bond that mattered. Lyra tried to stay calm, told her that her life was her own, but Dakota didn't leave. She stayed another hour, circling back to the same points, her anger echoing off the walls. Lyra eventually called me. By the time I got there, she looked drained. Her shoulders sagged, her eyes wet, but not crying anymore. I had to be the one to guide Dakota out. Even then, she resisted, standing in the doorway, glaring and saying, "You're both a disgrace. People will never accept this." When I closed the door behind her, Lyra just collapsed onto the couch. Now, Lyra and I are caught in the middle of something that feels bigger than us. We care for each other deeply, but every week feels like another wave crashing down. Some friends tell us to ignore it, that the noise will fade eventually. Others say we're stirring a storm that will never settle. And in between, Lyra and I are just trying to hold on to what we've built. But it isn't easy. Every night, I watch her stare at her phone, waiting for another message that she dreads and expects at the same time. Her shoulders tense with every vibration. Sometimes she silences it, but the weight still lingers. And sometimes, when I see that, I wonder if I'm asking too much of her. The worst moment so far came 2 nights ago. We were out for dinner, trying to create some normalcy, when her phone buzzed again. She sighed, opened it, and froze. It was a group message from several of her family members together. They had written a long paragraph, saying they were ashamed of her, that they no longer recognized her, and that if she continued down this path, she would lose more than she could ever imagine. Lyra stared at it in silence. She didn't touch her food after that. She didn't say a word until we got home. And when she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet I almost missed it. She said, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm ruining everything." I tried to tell her that love isn't ruined, that we weren't doing anything wrong. But even as I said it, I could see the doubt in her eyes. The doubt that maybe choosing me meant losing everyone else. Updated has been just over a month since things escalated, and the situation has taken a turn that neither Lyra nor I expected. At first, Dakota's family had seemed to pull back. Their calls and messages slowed, and for a brief moment, Lyra and I thought maybe they were finally giving up, that perhaps time would dull the anger and things could settle. I even allowed myself a small sigh of relief, but that calm didn't last long. It started with a message on WhatsApp from Lyra's brother, Leah. The message looked harmless at first glance, polite, even cordial, but the words underneath cut deep. He told her that the family had decided not to invite her to their grandmother's upcoming birthday celebration, a gathering she had attended every year without question. He wrote carefully, almost formally, but the message carried a clear undertone. "If you stay with Justin, you are no longer welcome at events that matter." Lyra read the message slowly, her thumb hovering over the screen as she scrolled back and forth, reading it again and again. Her hands trembled, and though she didn't cry immediately, I could see the shock settle into her chest, heavy and suffocating. Later that night, she curled up in bed, pulling the covers around her like a shield, and whispered, "I feel like I've lost everyone." I tried to hold her, to remind her gently that love was about choosing who stands by you, not who leaves, but my words felt inadequate against the magnitude of her pain. She didn't answer me at first. She just lay there, staring at the ceiling, tracing imaginary patterns on the sheet. I realized then that this wasn't just anger or disappointment. It was grief, the grief of being cast out from people she had trusted, people she had loved since childhood. A few days later, the pressure intensified. Dakota herself called me directly, something she hadn't done since our divorce. Her tone was colder than ice. She said, "Justin, if you really cared about Lyra, you'd end this now. You're tearing her life apart." She won't say it out loud, but she's suffering. There was a long pause, almost cruelly calculated. Then she added, "One day she'll realize you cost her family." And just like that, she hung up, leaving a ringing silence in the air. After that call, Lyra's behavior changed. She became quieter, more withdrawn. She answered texts late or sometimes didn't answer at all. At meals, she would push food around her plate, her eyes distant, her appetite gone. One evening, I finally asked her what was wrong, trying to sound calm even though my own chest was tight. She looked at me with tears threatening to spill, her voice barely above a whisper. "I love you, Justin. I do. But I miss my family. I miss the simple comfort of being part of them. Do you think they'll ever forgive us?" I didn't know what to say. There were no words that could bridge the chasm growing between her and the people she had known her entire life. I held her hand, squeezed it gently, but even that small gesture couldn't fill the emptiness. The next day brought another blow. Leah messaged again, this time sending screenshots of a group chat with other family members. They had been discussing her and me, using phrases like, "She's lost her way," "He's a bad influence," and "We can't let this continue." Lyra's eyes filled with tears as she read them aloud to me. For hours, we sat together on the couch in silence, the weight of their words pressing down on us. Then came an unexpected escalation. Dakota appeared outside Lyra's apartment door in the middle of the afternoon. She rang the buzzer relentlessly until Lyra let her in. I wasn't there, but Lyra described the confrontation afterward. Dakota paced the living room like a caged animal, her voice sharp and insistent. She said she would never forgive Lyra for choosing me, accusing her of betraying not only her family, but the memory of their shared past. Lyra stood firm, telling Dakota she had the right to live her life and make her own choices. But Dakota refused to leave, staying for nearly 2 hours, repeating the same accusations over and over, circling like a storm with no end. By the time she finally left, Lyra was exhausted, shaking from the intensity of the encounter. Afterwards, I tried to reassure her, but even I felt the strain. Every text, every call, every comment online from Dakota's family added a layer of tension. Our conversations began to fray at the edges. Arguments started to appear where there had been none. Small things, a delayed reply, a missed call, would spiral into guilt, frustration, or tears. One night, after a minor disagreement over a movie choice, Lyra suddenly burst into tears, saying, "I don't know how much more I can take. Justin, I'm trying, but I feel like I'm drowning." Her words hit me harder than anything Dakota or her family had said. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about us, about whether we could survive under this constant pressure. Every day brought a new test, every interaction with her family another potential wound. Even friends who tried to support us sometimes asked, "Are you sure this is worth it?" And I could see the fear in Lyra's eyes when she heard that question. One evening, we decided to try something different. We went for a long walk by the river, hoping that the rhythm of the water and the fading sunlight would calm us. Lyra stopped midway, took a deep breath, and said something that broke me. "If this doesn't calm down soon, I don't know how much more I can take. I feel like I'm being torn in half. I want to be with you, Justin, but I also want to belong somewhere else, somewhere safe." I held her hands, my voice steady even though my chest ached. "I'm not going anywhere. anywhere, Lyra. I'll fight for us. I can't control them, but I can be here for you. Always. But even as I said it, I felt the tension creeping into my own bones. Could love really be enough? Could we withstand the combined weight of her family's disapproval, Dakota's anger, and the creeping doubt that had begun to settle into Lyra's mind? The next few days were tense. Every phone buzz made her flinch. I found myself checking her messages, not because I wanted to pry, but because I couldn't bear to see her anxiety grow unchecked. Every text from her family felt like a battle, a war we hadn't asked for, but were forced to fight. And yet, through it all, Lyra's strength shone in moments of quiet resolve. When she told me, "I choose us," I believed her. But even then, the fear lingered, whispering that the next confrontation could break her, or me, or both. By the end of the month, we had managed a fragile rhythm. We still loved each other deeply, but the weight was palpable. Even small disagreements now carried a tension that hadn't existed before. Every shared laugh was tinged with an awareness that outside forces threatened to pull us apart. The house felt smaller, the nights longer, and the silences heavier. And yet, despite everything, we kept holding on. We learned to lean on each other in ways we hadn't before. We fought more openly, cried more honestly, and whispered our fears more freely. Every moment of tenderness was fought for, hard-won, and precious. I realized that even if we didn't know whether we would survive the storm, surviving together was worth the risk. Right now, we're still together. The air feels heavier with each passing day, and the silence between us grows. But for the first time in a long time, I can say we are facing it together. I want to believe we'll make it. I need to believe we'll make it. But sometimes, when the messages from her family appear, or when I see the look in Lyra's eyes after reading them, I know that love alone might not be enough to shield us from the world outside. Justin, your story captures the essence of being caught between love and external pressure, and it's far more complex than a simple question of right or wrong. Let's unpack it carefully, starting with the heart of the matter. You and Lyra are adults choosing to be together. You are not manipulating anyone. You are not coercing anyone, and you are not doing anything to actively harm Dakota or her family. What you are doing is living your life, making emotional decisions that bring you happiness and stability, and doing so openly, which is fundamentally different from being selfish in the destructive sense. Here's an insight that might help frame the situation. Dakota's anger, her attempts to assert family loyalty and blood ties, and her family's relentless pressure are all about control, as it's about trying to dictate someone else's choices using emotional leverage, guilt, and fear. And when someone invokes loyalty or shame as a weapon, it's rarely about the right or wrong of the actual relationship. It's about maintaining influence over another person, and you and Lyra are simply resisting that influence, choosing autonomy over obedience, which is morally defensible. Your position also shows emotional intelligence. As you recognize Lyra's internal struggle, she feels love for you, but also grief and conflict over being rejected by her family. And you're not dismissing her pain. You are supporting her, helping her navigate impossible emotional terrain, which is huge since many couples would crumble under this pressure, or worse, ignore the emotional toll and let resentment build. But you're actively acknowledging it, validating her feelings, and maintaining a safe space for the relationship to survive, which is the opposite of being the AITAH. Humor, if we want to inject a little relief into this heavy scenario, is in imagining Dakota's dramatic operatic style of protest. Storms at the apartment buzzer, endless voicemails, carefully orchestrated family pressure campaigns. And if life were a sitcom, this would be the running gag about a vengeful ex and her allies attempting to storm the gates of personal happiness. But unlike a sitcom, it's real life. And your challenge is maintaining composure amid absurdity and hostility. Practical insight. Setting boundaries is critical here, as you can't control every text, call, or comment, but you can control the space Lyra inhabits, the emotional environment around her, and your own responses. So document interactions, create physical and digital boundaries, and prioritize moments of calm and connection between you and Lyra, since small victories, like the walk by the river, quiet dinners, or honest conversations about fear, are incredibly meaningful in maintaining your bond. So, the verdict: you are not the AITAH, and Lyra is not the AITAH, as Dakota's attempts to shame, manipulate, or intimidate do not reflect moral high ground. They reflect resistance to someone else's happiness that challenges her own expectations, meaning the AITAHs, in this scenario, if we were to label them, are the enforcers of control and guilt, not the couple trying to live authentically. Your challenge moving forward is emotional resilience and boundary maintenance, as you must continue fostering Lyra's sense of security, protect your relationship from external pressures, and remind yourselves that love is about choice, not obligation. So while the storm may rage outside, within your space, you hold the power to preserve connection, tenderness, and trust. AITA for refusing to drive to my ex's house while I'd been drinking? My name is Zian, and I'm 33. I share custody of my 5-year-old daughter, Riley, with my ex, Joelle. She's been dating someone new for about a year, and they were expecting their first child together. On the surface, everything should have been been manageable, calm, and ordinary, but life has a way of showing you just how fragile normal can be. It was around 11:30 p.m. on a Friday when Joelle called me in a panic. Her voice was sharp, trembling, and urgent. She said that her partner was going into labor and asked me to pick up Riley immediately so they could get to the hospital without any distractions. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about helping. Riley's comfort and safety were always my top priority. But that night, I had been out earlier celebrating a friend's promotion. I had a few drinks, enough that I did not feel safe driving, enough that I knew I couldn't risk putting either myself or Riley in danger on the road. I told Joelle calmly, as measured as I could, "I can absolutely watch Riley, but you'll need to bring her to my place. I cannot drive in my current condition." I expected some understanding, or at least a pause to consider the situation rationally. I was wrong. The moment I said it, she erupted. Her voice screamed through the phone, insistent, demanding, almost frantic. She told me I needed to come over right now because her partner was in labor. She insisted, she pleaded, she threatened, and then she yelled. I tried to reason with her, my tone even, deliberate. "Riley is fine, and I can watch her, but I can't put either of us at risk. You're going to the hospital either way, but I can't drive under the influence." I could hear the frustration boiling in her voice, but I had to hold my ground. Driving drunk was not an option, not under any circumstance. She didn't listen. She called me irresponsible, reckless, selfish. She told me I didn't care about her or her baby. She claimed that drinking at a time like this was unforgivable, that I should have been prepared for labor, as if any parent could predict a baby's timing down to the exact hour. The conversation spiraled, the tension thickening until it felt like a physical presence in the room. I reminded her, again, that Riley was my responsibility during my parenting time, but her pregnancy and partner were not. Driving drunk would have been far worse than refusing to drive. Her frustration escalated. She started threatening to call the authorities, to report me as unfit, to have some sort of judgment imposed on me. She accused me of being a bad father in front of Riley. Though I reminded myself she wasn't present yet, I could feel the child's imminent involvement pressing in on me. I eventually hung up, unable to continue listening to the verbal barrage without it becoming toxic. I sent a text instead. "I'm home, and I can watch Riley. You need to bring her here if you want me to help." 20 minutes later, Joelle arrived. She stormed up to the door, visibly frustrated and angry, carrying herself like the world had wronged her personally. She dropped Riley off in front of me, still yelling as if volume could bend reality to her will. Riley's small frame looked startled, her eyes wide, scanning the tension, trying to make sense of a world that suddenly seemed confusing and loud. I took her inside, locked the door behind us, and held her close. I reassured her that everything was fine, that her mommy was at the hospital, that she was safe. But the tension clung to the air like smoke, and even Riley, small and perceptive, sensed it. Over the next hour, I tried to distract her with games, with stories, with anything to steer her mind away from the argument she had just witnessed. She asked questions in between the small moments of play, quiet and hesitant. "Why was mommy mad at you?" she whispered. "Is she going to be okay?" Each word felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. I tried to answer gently, choosing my words with care, but even the simplest reassurance couldn't erase the knot of anxiety in her small body. I couldn't stop thinking about the danger I had avoided. If I had gotten behind the wheel, intoxicated, Riley would have been exposed to risk I could never forgive myself for. But guilt gnawed at me anyway. Had I failed her in another way? Had I failed to obey her mother and therefore caused more tension? The question swirled without answer, and I had to keep my voice calm and steady for Riley's sake. I messaged Joelle later, asking for an update about the baby. Her response was clipped, distant, and almost sharp enough to draw blood in tone. She said both mother and baby were fine, but added that she was disappointed in me. I didn't respond. I had done what I believed was right, and yet I couldn't shake the guilt she tried to instill. The following days felt heavier than normal. Joelle continued sending cold, measured texts. Each one was polite in surface tone, but contained the invisible weight of judgment and expectation. "We need to talk about how we handle parenting responsibilities," she wrote. "Riley should never feel left out." Even if her words weren't angry, the implication was. Each text carried an accusation, and each carried the pressure of compliance. Riley noticed. She asked me questions I could not answer fully without crossing lines I wasn't ready to. She asked why mommy seemed angry at me, why things were tense, why some nights were calm while others seemed suddenly stormy. I reassured her as best I could, but I could see the anxiety growing. She wanted to understand, to make sense of the adult world, and all I could do was protect her from it as best I could. It wasn't just Joelle's immediate response that made the situation complicated. It was her parents, her family members, all of whom seemed to weigh in through messages, subtle digs, or thinly veiled criticism. "Not everyone puts family first," one message said. Another, "Some people think only about themselves." I felt assaulted from all sides. The tension a weight I couldn't drop, no matter how carefully I tried. Update: a week had passed since the incident, but the calm I had hoped for never arrived. At first, I thought Joelle might finally have cooled down. There was a temporary silence, and for a moment, I allowed myself to breathe. But that peace was shattered when my phone phone buzzed with a notification from WhatsApp. It was a message from Joelle, sent not to me alone, but to a family group we shared with my sister. I opened it and my chest sank. The message was long, meticulously typed, every word carefully chosen to sting. She accused me of being reckless, irresponsible, unfit as a parent, someone incapable of making the right choices for Riley. The tone was almost formal, but every sentence carried venom. I could see the subtle digs aimed not just at me, but at my character, at my ability to protect and care for our daughter. My sister read the message too. I could hear her typing, her disbelief bleeding through her words. Zian, is this really fair? I didn't answer. I couldn't. I felt my chest tighten as I realized how public Joelle had made the argument. It wasn't just between the two of us anymore. It had become a spectacle, something I hadn't asked for and certainly didn't want. Riley, curious and perceptive even at 5, had overheard part of it. Her small face appeared in the doorway, worry etched in her eyes. Daddy, why is Mommy saying bad things about you? She asked softly. My heart ached. I knelt to her level, holding her hands in mine, trying to choose words that wouldn't alarm her further. I told her, as simply as I could, that sometimes grown-ups say things they don't mean when they are scared or frustrated. That it wasn't about her. It wasn't about us not loving her. She looked at me, confusion and worry mingling in her expression, and I felt helpless. I wished I could explain it all, but I knew no explanation would fully shield her from the emotional chaos swirling around us. The next evening, Joelle escalated again. This time, it was a direct video call. She didn't even greet me. There was no hello, no small talk. Her face was tight, her jaw clenched, her eyes sharp. She immediately demanded that I pay for transportation if I wanted to pick up Riley during any emergency again. Her tone left no room for discussion. She said I should have been more responsible, that my drinking was reckless, that I had ruined the night for everyone involved. I tried to reason with her, to calmly explain that I had refused to drive because it was unsafe, but she didn't hear me. She interrupted constantly, raising her voice, labeling me selfish and careless. The argument lasted nearly 45 minutes. Riley was asleep in the background, unaware, but I could feel the weight of her presence pressing on me. I felt drained, frustrated, and deeply sad. The following day brought more unexpected tension. Riley, normally cheerful and playful, seemed quieter. She asked questions that stabbed at me with guilt. Why is Mommy upset with you? She whispered as we built blocks on the living room floor. I miss Mommy. Why are grown-ups fighting? I tried to calm her, to make sense of things without dragging her into the adult conflict. But her words were a stark reminder that the tension was leaking into her world, that she was noticing more than I wanted her to. That afternoon, another message arrived, this time from Joelle's mother. She had apparently heard about the argument and decided to weigh in. Her texts were relentless, arriving almost every hour. You're a bad influence on Riley, one read. You choose fun over family, said another. Each one chipped away at my confidence. Each one made me feel like I was being judged from every side. I began to feel trapped, cornered by criticism and expectation. It wasn't just a disagreement anymore. It was a storm, and it was growing. I realized then that this wasn't going to be a single argument, a one-night flare-up that could be forgotten. This was a persistent battle, a pressure I had to withstand while still keeping Riley safe, happy, and shielded from the adult conflicts around her. I rearranged my schedule, adding more time with her, more structured activities, more calming bedtime routines. I read her favorite books with exaggerated voices, made her favorite snacks even when I was exhausted, and tried to create an environment of safety and predictability. But even in those moments, the weight of the tension pressed down. I could see it in her hesitation, in the slight pause before she asked a question, in the small anxiety she didn't fully understand. Days passed with a fragile, tense rhythm. I avoided responding to Joelle's sporadic, icy messages immediately, carefully crafting responses that were firm but not inflammatory. I wanted to protect Riley from the drama, but each ping of my phone reminded me that it was impossible to completely escape. I found myself thinking constantly, did I do enough to explain? Did I do enough to protect her? How much of her emotional state was influenced by my choices versus Joelle's anger? Then, after several days of silence, Joelle finally sent a message that suggested some willingness to negotiate. She said she would be willing to talk civilly if I agreed to certain conditions, including meeting her halfway to pick up Riley in future emergencies. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to protect my daughter and my principles, to refuse to bend under pressure. But another part knew that compromise was necessary to prevent Riley from feeling caught in the middle yet again. I replied cautiously, agreeing to meet her halfway, but I also made it clear that I would never drive while impaired. I wanted to make my boundaries obvious, without creating another fight. She read the message but didn't respond for hours, leaving a silence heavier than any argument. That night, I went to bed thinking about how delicate our arrangement had become, how quickly anger could escalate, how easily damage could be done when emotions were raw and people were hurt. First, let's acknowledge acknowledge the core. You prioritized safety, both yours and Riley's, over convenience. Driving under the influence, even with the best intentions, would have introduced real danger. That decision wasn't just responsible, it was necessary. Any parent who disregards that threshold is failing not only their child, but themselves. Safety is non-negotiable, and by refusing to drive, you were acting with foresight, restraint, and genuine care. That is fundamentally the opposite of selfishness. The conflict with Joelle, while emotionally intense, is not a moral indictment of your character. Her reaction, yelling, accusations, threats, and involving extended family, reflects a projection of stress, fear, and perhaps insecurity about her own situation. Labor is unpredictable, high stress, and transformative. People sometimes lash out at those around them in ways that feel unfair but stem from anxiety rather than reasoned judgment. Her anger is understandable on a human level, but does not justify holding you morally culpable. Where the situation becomes complicated is the intersection of responsibility and perception. Joelle attempted to manipulate the narrative, painting you as reckless or unfit in a public space, and even dragging others, like your sister, into the dispute. That's not a reflection of your abilities as a father. It's an attempt to pressure, shame, and control outcomes through social dynamics. You resisted that narrative. You maintained your boundaries. You kept Riley safe. You chose principle over expedience. That is admirable. From a psychological perspective, you also managed Riley's exposure to stress remarkably well. A 5-year-old perceives tension and conflict far more acutely than adults realize. Your patience, reassurance, and efforts to normalize her environment were critical. You acted as a stabilizing force, cushioning her from chaos, and that is exactly what responsible parenting looks like. Even when guilt gnawed at you, you prioritized her emotional and physical security over pleasing an adult who was acting irrationally. That demonstrates both maturity and foresight. Humor can be found in imagining Joelle frantically transforming into a human alarm clock, rushing, shouting, and insisting the world bend to labor timelines, while you calmly insisted, "Sorry, no Uber called Dad driving drunk tonight." The absurdity highlights the fact that while emotions can surge, practical decisions must prevail, and you upheld that principle. The ongoing family commentary and subtle digs are distractions, not legitimate criticisms of your actions. They attempt to weaponize social pressure, guilt, and the appearance of moral authority. Recognize this for what it is: external noise. Your role is not to appease everyone. It's to ensure Riley's well-being and maintain responsible boundaries. Now, about compromise. You handled the suggestion of meeting halfway thoughtfully. You preserved your non-negotiable principle, never driving while impaired, while showing flexibility to prevent further emotional trauma for Riley. This is a nuanced, intelligent response that balances safety, responsibility, and diplomacy. That approach shows emotional sophistication. Verdict: you are not the AITA. You acted responsibly, ethically, and with foresight. Joelle's reaction, while humanly understandable under stress, does not make you the antagonist. If anyone could be labeled AITA here, it would be adults weaponizing fear, stress, and guilt against the parent who is actively prioritizing the child's safety. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments, and let us know which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely want to check out AITA for standing by my son after my family tried to exclude him. Click here to watch it now.